Hey, Fan Gang! Hope everyone had a fantastic Monday. Today, we are reading more Time in the Gods by Lord Dunsany. I almost said Gods of Pagana. But that was the book before Dracula, if I remember right. Let me put on my reading glasses. Let us hop right into this once I get a sip of tea. So, The Time in the Gods by Lord Dunsany, written in 1906? I think it was 6. Got my throat lozenge, I'm ready to go. Starting with The Vengeance of Men. Also, I got a new mic over the weekend, so if you think this sounds better, go and let me know. The Vengeance of Men. Ere the beginning, the gods divided earth into waste and pasture. Pleasant pastures they made to be green over the face of earth. Orchards they made in valleys, and heather upon hills. But Harza they doomed, predestined and foreordained to be a waste forever. Harza is the name of the place. Got it. When the world prayed at evening to the gods. Is my voice too loud? I'm hitting the red. 1 second. How about now? A little more. Try it at -6. Let's try that tonight. We'll see how that sounds. Where was I? When the world prayed at evening to the gods, and the gods answered prayers, they forgot the prayers of all the tribes of Arim. Therefore, the men of Arim were assailed with wars and driven from the land to land, and yet would not be crushed. And the men of Arim made them gods for themselves, appointing men as gods until the gods of Pagana should remember them again. This won't end well. And their leaders, Eoth and Haneth, played the part of gods and led their people on through every tribe assailed them. At last, they came to Harza, where no tribes were, and at last had rest from war. And Eoth and Haneth said, "The work is done, and surely now Pagana's gods will remember." And they built a city in Harza, and tilled the soil, and the green came over the waste as the wind comes over the sea. And there were fruit and cattle in Harza, and the sounds of 1,000,000 sheep. There they rested from their flight from all the tribes, and builded fables out of all their sorrows, till all the men smiled in Harza, and children laughed. Then said the gods, "Earth is no place for laughter." Thereat, they strode to Pagana's outer gate. Lowercase gods. They're talking about, where's the names? Yoth and Haneth. That's who they're talking about here with lower G god. Thereat, they strode to Pagana's outer gate, to where the pestilence lay curled asleep, and waking him up, they pointed toward Harza, and the pestilence leapt forward, howling across the sky. That night, he came to the fields near Harza, and stalking through the grass, sat down and glared at the lights, and licked his paws, and glared at the light again. But the next night, unseen, through laughing crowds, the pestilence crept into the city, and stealing into the houses one by one, peered into the people's eyes, looking even through their eyelids, so that when morning came, men stared before them, crying out they saw the pestilence whom others saw not, and thereafter died, because their green eyes of the pestilence had looked into their souls. Chill and damp was he, yet there came heat from his eyes that parched the souls of men. Then came the physicians and men learned in magic, and made the sign of the physicians and the signs of men of magic. And I messed that up. It made the sign of the physicians and the sign of the men of magic, and no, I got that right. It's just worded weird. Okay. Also, random aside, I like that detail of Pestilence having green eyes. That it's insignificant world building that I like. Weird sentence. It made the sign of the physicians and the sign of the men of magic, and cast blue water upon herbs, enchanted spells. But still, the pestilence crept from house to house, and still he looked into the souls of men. And the lives of the people streamed away from Harza, and whither they went is set in many books. But the pestilence fed on the light that shines in the eyes of men, which never appeased his hunger. Chiller and damper he grew, and the heat from his eyes increased. When night by night he galloped through the city, going by stealth no more. Then did men pray in Harza to the gods, saying, "High gods, show clemency to Harza." Lower G gods? So they're gods, not the gods of Pagano? I'm getting confused now. I'm not sure which gods they're talking about here. I thought before lower G gods meant they're human gods, but now I'm not so sure. And the gods listened to their prayers, but as they listened, they pointed with their fingers and cheered the pestilence on. And the pestilence grew bolder at his masters' voices, and thrust his face close up before the eyes of men. He could be seen by none saving by those he smote. At first, he slept by day, lying in misty hollows. But as his hunger increased, he sprang up even in sunlight and clung to the chests of men and looked down through their eyes into their souls that shriveled, until almost he could be dimly seen even by those he smote not. Gotta sit up. I'm starting to shrimp. I don't want to be a shrimp. I just want to be a vampire. Adro, the physician, sat in his chamber with one light burning, making a mixing in a bowl that should drive the pestilence away, when through his door there blew a draught that set draft. That's like a draft of beer, not a draft of air. Okay. Draft that set the light a flickering. Then, because the draught was cold, the physician shivered and went and closed the door. But as he turned again, he saw the pestilence lapping at his mixing, who sprang and set one paw upon Adro's shoulder, and another upon his cloak, while with two he clung to his waist and looked him in the eyes. Two men were walking in the street. One said to the other, "Upon the morrow I will sup with thee." And the pestilence grinned a grin that none beheld, baring his dripping teeth, and crept away to see whether upon the morrow those men should sup together. A traveler coming in said, "This is Harza. Here I will rest." But his life went further than Harza upon that day's journey. All feared the pestilence, and those that he smote beheld him. But none saw the great shapes of the gods by starlight, as they urged their pestilence on. Then all men fled from Harza, and the pestilence chased dogs and rats and sprang upwards at the bats as they sailed above him, who died and lay in the streets. But soon he turned and pursued the men of Harza where they fled, and sat by rivers where they came to drink, away below the city. Then back to Harza went the people of Harza, pursued by the pestilence still, and gathered in the temple of all the gods save one, and said to the high prophet, what may be... Word start. What may now be done? What may be now done? Not what may now be done. Oh. She's starting to write like Yoda. Who answered, all the gods have mocked at prayer. This sin must now be punished by the vengeance of men. And the people stood in awe. The high prophet went up to the tower beneath the sky, whereupon beat the eyes of all the gods by starlight. There in the sight of the gods he spake in the ear of the gods, saying, high gods, ye have made mock of men. Know therefore that it is writ in ancient lore, and found by prophecy, that there is an end that waiteth for the gods, who shall go down from Pegana in galleons of gold all down the silent river and into the silent sea. And there their galleons shall go up in mist, and they shall be gods no more. And men shall gain harbor from the mocking of the gods at last, and the warm moist earth. But to the gods shall no ceasing ever come from being the things that were the gods. When time and the worlds and death are gone away, naught shall then remain but one regrets and things that once were gods. One thing I'm getting is that in this sequel to the Gods of Pegana, or I should start in the original Gods of Pegana book, the gods were a lot less jerks. They're downright bastardly in this one, except for like the child god and the music god. Those are like the only exceptions. All the others are complete bastards. I mean, they had their fair share of bastardliness in the first book, but this is intense. In the sight of the gods, in the ears of the gods. Then the gods shouted all together and pointed with their hands at the high prophet's throat, and the pestilence sprang. Long since the high prophet is dead, and his words are forgotten by men. But the gods know not whether it be true that the end is waiting for the gods, and him, excuse me, and him who might have told them they have slain. And the gods of Pegana are fearing the fear that hath fallen upon the gods because of the vengeance of men. For they know not when the end shall be, or whether it shall come. Is that a retcon? I feel like the gods knew about that in the first book. Because, the temple of all the gods save one. That save one, that's the chief deity who created everything else, who was above the gods of Pegana. And when that god, the save one, wakes up, he's going to erase everything. According to the first book, is literally everything. Like, there's no time, there's no nothing. There's no humanity left after the gods are gone. So, and the gods knew this, it seemed like, and it was their secret for men, but then men found the secret. But this is changing that. So maybe I'm misremembering, that seems like a retcon to the first book. Which is, it is what it is. It's not good or bad. It's just a change. Assuming I'm not wrong and making shit up again. It's always possible that's happening. The next story. When the gods slept. All the gods were sitting in, all the gods save one, were sitting in Pegana, and their slave, Time, lay idle at Pegana's gate, with nothing to destroy, when they thought of worlds. worlds large and round and gleaming, and little silver moons. Then, who knoweth when, as the gods raised their hands, making the sign of the gods, the thoughts of the gods became worlds and silver moons. And the worlds swam by Pegana's gate to take their places in the sky. This is very different, because the worlds were made by the save one. I forget his name. He had a name, if I remember right, and not the gods of Pegana. The gods of Pegana just, like, showed up. I might be misremembering the first book, but this is very different. Take their places in the sky, the worlds that is, to ride at anchor forever, each where the gods had bidden. And because they were round and big and gleamed all over the sky, the gods laughed and shouted and all clapped their hands. Then, okay, this is distracting me, so I have to talk about it. Earlier in this book, they were talking about Sid, the ocean god of the sea or whoever, who was an invader to the other gods, but now they're talking about him as being a part of these gods in Pegana because he helped the Dawn Child. So it's also being inconsistent with that. So this sequel book is starting to get internally inconsistent, I'm thinking. Maybe I'm missing something. Anyways, we'll continue on. That was distracting me and I had a yap about it. Is yap out of style now? Should I not say yap? Is it just chat? Is it just tangent again? Yap went hard for like half a year. I don't know if it's old, if it's a tired meme now. Then upon Earth, the gods played out the game of the gods. The game of life and death. And on the other worlds, they did a secret thing. Playing a game that is hidden. At last, they mocked no more at life and laughed at death no more. And cried aloud in Pegana, "Will no new thing be? Must those four march forever round the world, till our eyes are wearied with the treading of the feet of the seasons, that will not cease, while night and day and life and death drearily rise and fall." They're crybabies in this book. The gods are bigger chads in the first one. I sound like I'm just ripping this book. It's so good. It's just changes that are catching me off guard. And as a child stares at the bare walls of a narrow hut. Is that something children do? I guess in a simpler time there wouldn't be anything else to do but stare at the wall. Fair enough. I don't know, go outside and touch grass. That's what I did as a kid. You know, you pick up a leaf and it looks cool. So you're like, oh, I'll play with this leaf for all day. That's what you do as a kid. How boring are you that you're staring at a wall in a hut? Go outside. I'm easily distracted today. Where was I? The hut. That damn hut. Where the frick was it? Here, a narrow hut. So the gods looked all listlessly upon the worlds, saying, "Will no new thing be?" And in their weariness, I have to tangent again. They're complaining about there being no new things right after it being said that they created new things. So maybe this is a faulty, unreliable narrator who's retroactively changing history. And in truth, it was the Save One, the chief deity that did create everything, and these gods are just being assholes like they are, taking credit for it. I think I'm overthinking this. I gotta save my overthinking for tomorrow when we're playing Slay the Princess. I just gotta get through this, man. And in their wariness, the gods said, "Ah, to be young again. Ah, to be fresh once more from the brain of Mana Yudzushai." He's the chief deity. That's his name, Mana Yudzushai. He is the Save One who is asleep. And when he wakes up, everything dies. Good old sushi. And they turned away their eyes in weariness from all the gleaming worlds and laid them down upon Pegana's floor. For they said, It may be that the world shall pass, and we would fain forget them. Then the gods slept. Then did the comet break loose from his moorings, and the eclipse roamed about the sky. And down on earth did death's three children, famine, pestilence, and drought, come out to feed. The eyes of the famine were green, and the eyes of the drought were red. But the pestilence was blind and smote about all round him with his claws among the city. This is directly contradicting what literally the last story said, because pestilence and that had green eyes. So my best guess on what is happening at this is that this is an unreliable narrator, because now we're having direct conflictions in the canon here. Okay, we're moving on. I can't stop. It's been way too long we've been on the same page. But as the gods slept, there came from beyond the rim, out of the dark and unknown, three Yozis, spirits of ill, that sailed up the river of silence in galleons with silver sails. Far away they had seen Yulm and Gotham, the stars that stand sentinel over Pegana's gate, blinking and falling asleep. And as they neared Pegana, they found a hush wherein the gods slept heavily. Yah, Ha, and Snurg. Really, that's their names? Yah, Ha, and Snurg were these three Yozis, the lords of evil, madness, and of spite. When they crept from their galleons and stole over Pegana's silent threshold, it boded ill for the gods. There in Pegana lay the gods asleep, and in a corner lay the power of the gods alone upon the floor, a thing wrought of black rock, and 4 words graven upon it, whereof I might not give thee any clue, if even I should find it. 4 words of which none knoweth. Some say they tell of the opening of a flower toward dawn, and others say they concern earthquakes among hills, and others that they tell of the death of fishes. Oh my. Not the fishes. Okay. And others that the words be these: power, knowledge, forgetting, and another word that not the gods themselves may ever guess. These words the Yozis read, and sped away in dread lest the gods should awake, and going aboard their galleons, bade the rowers haste. Thus the Yozis became gods, having the power of gods, lowercase g, and they, lowercase t, sailed away to the earth, and came to a mountainous island in the sea. There they sat upon the rocks, sitting as the gods sit, with their right hands uplifted, and having the power of gods, only none came to worship. Thither came no ships nigh them, nor ever at evening came the prayers of men, nor smell of incense, nor screams from the sacrifice. Then said the Yozis. The Yozis didn't sniff, that was me. Of what avail is it that we be gods if no one worship us nor give us sacrifice? And Yah, Ha, and Snurg set sail in their silver galleons and went looming down the sea to come to the shores of men. And first they came to an island where folk fish. And the folk of the island, running down to the shore, cried out to them, "Who be ye? And the Yozis answered, "We be 3 gods, and we would have your worship." But the fisher folk answered, "Here we worship Ram, the thunder, and have no worship nor sacrifice for other gods." Then the 3 Yozis snarled with anger and sailed away, and sailed till they came to another shore, sandy with low and forsaken. Sandy and low and forsaken. And at last they found an old man upon the shore, and they cried out to him, "Old man upon the shore, we be 3 gods that were well to worship, gods of great power, and apt in the granting of prayer." The old man answered, "We worship Pegana's gods, who have fondness for our incense and the sound of our sacrifice when it squeals upon the altar." Man, the gods are bastards. Then answered Sneerg. "Asleep are Pegana's gods, nor will they wake for the humming of thy prayers which lie in the dust of Pegana's floor, and over them Sneeracht, the spider of the worlds, hath woven a web of mist, and the squealing of the sacrifice maketh no music in ears that are closed in sleep." He didn't sniff, that's me. That was a Sneerg. The old man answered, standing upon the shore, "Now all the gods of old shall answer our prayers no longer, yet still to the gods of old shall all men pray here in Cyrenai? Sure, Cyrenai. But the Yozis turned their ships about, and angrily sailed away, all cursing Cyrenai and Cyrenai's gods, but most especially the old men that stood upon the shore. Still, the 3 Yozis lusted for the worship of men, and came on the 3rd night of their sailing to a city's lights. And nearing the shore, they founded a city of song wherein all folk rejoiced. Then sat each Yozi on his galleon's prow, and leered with his eyes upon the city, so that the music stopped and the dancing ceased. And all looked out to see at the strange shapes of the Yozis beneath their silver sails. Then Sneerg demanded their worship, promising increase of joys, and swearing by the light of his eyes that he would send little flames to leap over the grass to pursue the enemies of that city, to chase them about the world. But the people answered that in that city men worshipped Agrodon, the mountain standing alone, and might not worship other gods, even though they came in galleons with silver sails, sailing from over the sea. But Sneerg answered, "Certainly Agrodon is only a mountain, and in no manner a god." But the priests of Argodon sang answer from the shore, "In the sacrifice of men may not Agrodon a god, nor blood still young on his rocks, nor the little fluttering prayers of 10,000 hearts, nor 2,000 years of worship, and all the hopes of the people, and the whole of the strength of our race. Then there are no gods, and ye be common sailors, sailing from over the sea." Then said the Yozis, "Hath Agrodon answered prayer?" And the people heard the words that the Yozis said. Then went the priests of Agrodon away from the shore, and up the steep streets of the city, the people following, and over the moor beyond it to the foot of Agrodon, and then said, "Agrodon, if thou art not our god, go back and herd with the yonder common hills, and put a cap of snow upon thy head, and crouch far off, as they do beneath the sky. But if we have given thee divinity in 2,000 years, If our hopes are all about thee like a cloak, then stand and look upon thy worshippers from over our city forever. And the smoke that ascended from his feet stood still, and there fell a hush over great Agrodon. And the priest went back to the sea and said to the three Yozis, New gods shall have our worship when Agrodon grows weary of being our god, and when in some night time he shall stride away, leaving us naught to gaze at that is higher than our city. And the Yozis sailed away and cursed towards Agrodon, but could not hurt him, for he was but a mountain. And the Yozis sailed along the coast till they came to a river running to the sea, and they sailed up the river till they came to a people at work who furrowed the soil and sowed, and strove against the forest. Then the Yozis called to the people as they worked in the fields, Give us your worship, and ye shall have many joys. But the people answered, We may not worship you. Then answered Snirg, Yea, also, have ye a god? And the people answered, We worship the years to come, and we set the world in order for their coming, as one layeth raiment on the road before the advent of a king. And when those years shall come, they shall accept the worship of a race they knew not, and their people shall make their sacrifice to the years that follow them, who, in their turn, shall minister to the end. Excuse me. Then answered Snirg. Gods that shall recompense you not. Rather give us your prayers and have our pleasures, the pleasures that we shall give you. And when your gods shall come, let them be wroth. They cannot punish you. Oh, wrong window. There we go. But the people continued to sacrifice their labor to their gods, the years to come, making the world a place for gods to dwell in. And the Yozis cursed those gods and sailed away. And Yah, the Lord of Malice, swore that when those years should come, they should see whether it were well for them to have snatched away the worship from 3 Yozis. And still the Yozis sailed, for they said, It were better to be birds and have no air to fly in, than to be gods having neither prayers nor worship. But where sky met with ocean, the Yozis saw land again, and thither sailed. And there the Yozis saw men in strange old garments, performing ancient rites in a land of many temples. And the Yozis called to the men as they performed their ancient rites and said, We be 3 gods well versed in the needs of men, to worship whom were to obtain instant joy. But the men said, We have already gods. And Snirg replied, Ye too. The men answered, For we worship the things that have been, and all the years that were. Divinely have they helped us. Therefore we give them worship that is their due. People are really worshiping anything that isn't a Yozi. Yozis just can't get none. And the Yozis answered the people, We be gods of the present, and return good things for worship. But the people answered, saying from the shore, Our gods have given us already the good things, and we return them the worship that is their due. And the Yozis set their faces to landward, and cursed all things that had been, and all the years that were, and sailed on their galleons away. A rocky shore in an inhuman land stood up against the sea. Thither the Yozis came and found no man, But out of the dark, from inland towards evening, came a herd of great baboons, and chattered greatly when they saw the ships. I see where this is going. Then spake Sneerg to them, Have ye too a god? And the baboons spat. Then said the Yozis, We be seductive gods, having a particular remembrance for little prayers. But the baboons leered fiercely at the Yozis and would have none of them for gods. One said that prayers hindered the eating of nuts, but Sneerg leaned forward and whispered, and the baboons went down upon their knees and clasped their hands as men clasp, and chattered prayer, and said to one another that these were the gods of old, and gave Yozis their worship. For Sneerg had whispered in their ears that, if they would worship the Yozis, he would make them men. And the baboons arose from worshipping, smoother about the face, and a little shorter in the arms, and went away and hid their bodies in clothing, and afterwards galloped away from rocky shore, and went and herded with men. And men could not discern what they were, for their bodies were bodies of men, though their souls were still the souls of beasts, and their worship went to Yozis, spirits of ill. And the lords of malice, hatred, and madness sailed back to their island in the sea, and sat upon the shore as gods sit, with right hand uplifted. And at evening, foul prayers from the baboons gathered about them and infested the rocks. But in Pagana, the gods awoke with a start. That was a really good story. I enjoyed that one. One second, I gotta blow my nose. Okay, I remember to mute my mic that time. Next story, The King That Was Not. The land of Runazar hath no king, nor ever had one. And this is the law of the land of Runazar, that seeing that hath never had a king, it shall not have one forever. Therefore, in Runazar, the priests hold sway, who tell the people that never in Runazar hath there been a king. Althazar, king of Runazar, and lord of all lands nearby, commanded for the closer knowledge of the gods that their images should be carven in Runazar, and in all lands nearby. And when Althazar's command, wafted abroad by trumpets, came tinkling in the ear of all the gods, right glad were they at the sound of it. Therefore, men quarried marble from the earth, and sculptors busied themselves in Runazar to obey edict of the king. Oh, and Allie, hope you're having a good night. But the gods stood by starlight, on the hills where the sculptors might see them, and draped the clouds about them, and put upon them their divinest air, that sculptors might do justice to Pagana's gods. Then the gods strode back into Pagana, and the sculptors hammered and wrought. And there came a day when the master of sculptors took audience of the king, saying, Althazar, king of Runazar, high lord, moreover of all the lands nearby, to whom be the gods benignant, humbly we have completed the images of all such gods as were in thine edict named. Then the king commanded a great space to be cleared among the houses in his city, and there the images of all the gods were born and set before the king, and there were assembled the master of sculptors and all his men. And before each stood a soldier bearing a pile of gold upon a jeweled tray. And behind each stood a soldier with a drawn sword pointing against their necks. And the king looked upon the images, and lo, they stood as gods with clouds all draped about them, making the sign of the gods. But their bodies were those of men, and lo, their faces were very like the king's, and their beards were as the king's beard. And the king said, "These be indeed Pegana's gods." And the soldiers that stood before the sculptors were caused to present them the piles of gold, and the soldiers that stood behind the sculptors were caused to sheath their swords. And the people shouted, "These be indeed Pegana's gods, whose faces we are permitted to see by the will of Althazar the king, to whom be the gods benignant." And heralds were sent abroad through the cities of Runazar and of all the lands nearby, proclaiming of the images, "These be Pegana's gods." But in Pegana, the gods howled with the wrath, and Mung leapt forward to make the sign of Mung against Althazar the king. But the gods laid their hands upon his shoulder, saying, "Slay him not, for it is not enough that Althazar shall die, who hath made the faces of the gods to be like the faces of men, but he must not ever have been." The gods are bastards. Then said the gods, "Spake we of Althazar, a king?" And the gods said, "Nay, we spake not." And the gods said, "Dreamed we of one Althazar?" And the gods said, "Nay, we dreamed not." But in the royal palace of Runazar, Althazar, passing suddenly out of the remembrance of the gods, became no longer a thing that was or had ever been. And by the throne of Althazar lay a robe, and near it lay a crown. And the priests of the gods entered his palace and made it a temple of the gods. And the people coming to worship said, "Whose was this robe, and to what purpose this crown?" And the priests answered, "The gods have cast away the fragment of a garment, and lo, from the fingers of the gods hath slipped one little ring." And the people said to the priests, "Seeing that Runazar hath never had a king, therefore be ye our rulers, and make ye our laws in the sight of Pegana's gods." That's a cute story. I like that it brought back Moon from the first book, because a lot of the second book has been kind of retconning stuff. The Cave of Kai. The pomp of crowning was ended. The rejoicings had died away, and Canazar, the new king, sat in the seat of the kings of Averon to do his work upon the destinies of men. His uncle, Canazar the Lone, had died, and he had come from a far castle to the south, with a great procession to Han? Elon? This is a bad scan, I can't see that. I'm gonna guess Han. Yeah, I'm gonna guess Han. To Han, the citadel of Averon. And there they had crowned him king of Averon, and of the mountains, and lord, if there be aught beyond those mountains, of all such lands as are. But now the pomp of the crowning was gone away, and Canazar sat afar off from his home, a very mighty king. Then the king grew wary of the destinies of Averon, and wary of the making of commands. So Canazar sent heralds through all cities, saying, "Hear the will of the king, hear the will of the king of Averon, and of the mountains and lord, if there be aught beyond those mountains, of all such lands as are, let there come together to Han, that must be Elon, all such as have an art in secret matters here. And there gather together to Elon the wise men of all the degrees of magic, even to the 7th, who had made spells before Canazar the Lone, and they came before the new king in his palace, placing their hands upon his feet. Then said the king to the musicians, I have a need. And they answered, The earth touches the feet of the king in token of submission. But the king answered, My need is not of the earth, but I would find certain the hours that have been, and sundry days that were. And all the wise folks were silent, till there spake out mournfully the wisest of them all, who made spells in the 7th degree, saying, The days that were, and the hours have winged their way to Mount Agdora's summit, and there, dipping, have passed away from sight, not ever to return. For haply they have not heard the king's command. Of these wise folk are many things chronicled. Moreover, it is set in writing of the scribes how they had an audience of King Canazar, and of the words they spake, but of their further deeds there is no legend. But it is told how the king sent men to run and to pass through all the cities till they should find one that was wiser even than the magicians that had made spells before Canazar the Lone. Far up the mountains that limit Averon, they found Siran, the prophet, among the goats, who said that none of the degrees of magic, and who had cast no spells before the former king. Him they brought to Canazar, and the king said unto him, I have a need. And Siran answered, Thou art a man. And the king said, Where lie the days that were in certain hours? And Siran answered, These things lie in a cave afar from here, and over the cave stands sentinel one Kai. And this cave Kai hath guarded from the gods and men since ever the beginning was made. It may be that he shall let Canazar pass by. Then the king gathered elephants and camels that carried burdens of gold, and trusty servants that carried precious gems, and gathered an army to go before him, and an army to follow behind, and sent out horsemen to warn the dwellers of the plains that the king of Averon was afoot. Rude, you don't want to be underfoot. And he bade Siran to lead to that place where the days of old lie hid, and all forgotten hours. Across the plain and up Mount Agdora, and dipping beyond its summit, went Canazar the king, and his 2 armies, who followed Siran. 8 times the purple tent with golden border had been pitched for the king of Averon, and 8 times it had been struck ere the king and the king's armies came to a dark cave in a valley dark, where Kai stood guard over the days that were. In the face of Kai was a warrior that vanquisheth cities, and burdened himself not with captives. And his form was as the forms of gods, but his eyes were the eyes of beasts. Before whom came the king of Averon, with elephants and camels bearing burdens of gold, and trusty servants carrying precious gems. Then said the king, Yonder behold my gifts. Give back to me my yesterday with its waving banners, my yesterday with its music and blue sky, and all its cheering crowds that made me king, the yesterday that sailed with gleaming wings over my Averon. And Kai answered, pointing to his cave, Thither, dishonored and forgot, thy yesterday slunk away. And who amid the dusty heap of the forgotten days shall grovel to find thy yesterday? Then answered the king of Averon, and of the mountains and lord, if there be aught beyond them, of all such lands as are. I will go down on my knees in yon dark cave, and search my hands amid the dust, if so I may find my yesterday again, and certain hours that are gone. And the king pointed to his piles of gold that stood where elephants were met together, and beyond them to the scornful camels. And Kai answered, The gods have offered me the gleaming worlds, and all as far as the rim, and whatever lies beyond it as far as the gods may see. And thou comest to me with elephants and camels. Then said the king, Across the orchards of my home there hath passed 1 hour whereof thou knowest well, and I pray to thee, who wilt take no gifts borne upon elephants or camels, to give me of thy mercy 1 second back, 1 grain of dust that clings to that hour in the heap that lies within thy cave. And at the word mercy, Kai laughed, and the king turned his armies to the east. Therefore the armies returned to Averon, and the heralds before them cried, Here cometh Canazar, king of Averon, and of the mountains and lord, if there be aught beyond those mountains, of all such lands as are. And the king said to them, Say rather, here comes one greatly wearied, who, having accomplished naught, returneth from a quest forlorn. So the king came again to Averon. But it is told how there came into Elon one evening as the sun was setting, a harper with a golden harp, desiring audience of the king. And it is told how men led him to Canazar. What? Kai is he's a lumpy boy. I wasn't expecting that. Why is Kai so lumpy? Okay. Kai's a... I was expecting some big guy, a big soldier guy, and he's just a lumpy boy. Kind of a sad sack. Okay, we're gonna gloss over that. It is told how men led him to Canazar, who sat frowning alone upon his throne, to whom said the harper, I have a golden harp, and to its strings have clung like dust some seconds out of the forgotten hours and little happenings of the days that were. And Canazar looked up, and the harper touched the strings, and the old forgotten things were stirring again. And there arose a sound of songs that had passed away, and long since voices. Then, when the harper saw that Canazar looked not angrily upon him, his fingers tramped over the chords as the gods tramped down the sky. I think I know who this guy is. And out of the golden harp arose a haze of memories, and the king, leaning forward and staring before him, saw in the haze no more his palace walls, but saw a valley with a stream that wandered through it, and woods upon either hill, and an old castle standing lonely to the south. And the harper, seeing a strange look upon the face of Canazar, said, Is the king pleased, who lords it over Averon and the mountains, and, if there be aught beyond them, over all such lands as are? And the king said, Seeing that I am a child again in a valley to the south, how may I say what may be the will of a great king? When the stars shone over high Elon, and still the king sat staring straight before him, all the courtiers drew away from the great palace, save one that stayed and kept one taper burning, and with them went the harper. And when the dawn came up through silent archways into the marble palace, making the taper pale, the king still stared before him, and still he sat there when the stars shone again clearly and high above Elon. But on the second morning, the king arose and sent for the harper and said to him, I am king again, and thou hast a skill to stay the hours, and mayest bring again to men their forgotten days. Thou shalt stand sentinel over my great tomorrow, and when I go forth to conquer Zemanho, and make my armies mighty, thou shalt stand between that tomorrow in the cave of Kai, and haply some deed of mine in the battling of my armies shall cling to thy golden harp, and not go down dishonored into the cave. For my tomorrow, who with such resounding stride goes trampling through my dreams, is far too kingly to herd with forgotten days in the dust of things that were. But on some future day, when kings are dead and all their deeds forgotten, some harper of that time shall come from those golden strings, awake those deeds that echo in my dreams, till my tomorrow shall stride forth among the lesser days, and tell the years that Canazar was a king. And, answered the harper, I will stand sentinel over thy great tomorrow, and when thou goest forth to conquer Zemanho, and make thine armies mighty, I will stand between thy morrow in the cave of Kai, till thy deeds in the battling of thine armies shall cling to my golden harp, and not go down dishonored into the cave, so that when kings are dead and all their deeds forgotten, the harpers of the future time shall awake from these golden chords those deeds of thine. This I will do. Men of these days that be skilled upon the harp tell still of Canazar, how that he was king of Averon and of the mountains, and claimed lordship over certain lands beyond, and how he went with armies against Zemanho and fought great battles, and in the last gained victory and was slain. But Kai, as he waited with his claws together in the last days of Canazar, that they might loom enormous in his cave, still found them not, and only gathered in some meaner deeds in the days and hours of lesser men, and was vexed by the shadow of a harper that stood between him and the world. I thought the harper was going to be the god of music, but it was just a guy, a bass guy. I like that. Also, I have to look at the lumpy boy again. Kai is so lumpy, but they talked him up to be like some big warrior who took no prisoners, and he's just a lumpy guy. Okay. It is 2:30 in the morning. I need to write down the page number, page 77, before I forget yet again. Page 77. Okay, that is going to be it for tonight. Tomorrow we are playing more Slay the Princess, which I am looking forward to because I enjoyed the hell out of that game last week. So, I'll see everyone tomorrow at 1:30 a.m. Eastern. Hope the Fang Gang has a fantastic Tuesday. Take care, everyone. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, go and like and subscribe to the channel.